Good evening, book people of the internet. It is that time of the month where I tell you the books I read. So last month was a really low reading month for me. I only read 22 books. And this month I wasn't quite up to the insanity of January, but I did read 31. So we are going to do the lightning round again. I learned some things last time that will hopefully make it more successful this time around. I think I found a better timer. It's still pretty annoying. It's a work in progress, but it's not as annoying as the last timer. Also, I don't have to reset it every time. I can just press a button and it'll go again. So that's great. So let's get going. This is my April wrap up. So as always, I'm going to be starting with the least liked books and then going to the best books I read this month, or my favorite books I read this month. So first up, let's talk DNFs. I did have 2 DNFs that I don't have physical copies of right now. The first one I'm barely going to talk about, and that's Enchanted Hill by Emily Bain Murphy. This was a pick for one of my in real life book clubs. It's a historical mystery and I got 15 pages in. So, I mean, it's not a bad book. I could tell from the way that it was written. If I would have finished it, I would have given it like a 3.5 stars. But I had so many other books at that particular moment and I waited way too long to start it for book club. So I just stopped. I said, I'm not going to force myself to read this probably mediocre book. And I moved on with my life. Oh wait, why did I put that? I only had 2 DNFs, sorry, hold on. Okay, sorry. Okay, so that was my first DNF, was Enchanted Hill. The second one I just DNF'd the other day. Let's talk about this one real quick. I'm gonna set my timer. Actually, you know what? For DNFs, I'm not gonna even do the timer because I don't have much to say. So I read Fruits Basket, Volume 1, the collector's edition. I was actually really excited about this. I picked it up for Read Harder this year. One of the challenges was, again, to read a manga or a manhwa. And I had this on my radar for a while. Everyone seems to love it. I hated it. It was like the art style, the tone, it felt all over the place. The translation felt weird. I didn't like it at all. So I think what I'm going to do, since I am interested in the premises, I'm going to watch the anime. I'm not sure which anime to watch. If any of you are familiar with the animes, please tell me if the newer, prettier one is good, because that's the one I'm leaning towards. I will watch the non-pretty one if I have to, but just tell me which one's good. That is my first DNF. So now let's actually get to the timer. So this time I am actually giving myself 45 seconds to talk about all these books. Hopefully that will give me a little bit more time, but still limit me. I don't know. We might go back to 30 seconds later, or 40, or 42, or something, but we're going to do 45 seconds right now. Okay. Now that I've talked about my DNFs, I didn't have any 1 stars. I did have 1 2-star read that I thought was a DNF, but I did finish it. That's how memorable it was. So let's talk about that one. And that is Late Bloomer by Maisie Eddings. And let's go. Okay, so this is a sapphic contemporary romance by this author. I'd never read anything by Maisie Eddings before, but the cover is beautiful. Look at it. Look at this cover. It is so beautiful. Also, it's not accurate. These characters don't look like that. They don't look like that in the book at all. So that was a red flag, but it tricked me because I hated it. It was so cheesy. The characterization was terrible. It thought it was really funny when it wasn't. It was so weird. I don't even know how to talk about why I didn't like this book. It was just like everything, every other line, I was like, I hate this. I hate this. Please stop. And it's so sad because it had such a potential to be good with the flower farm thing. Okay, you can't hear when my timer's going off. I don't know why you can't hear it. That was weird and anticlimactic. Maybe I'll put my own ding in. Anyway, Late Bloomer. Next up is 3-star, my first 3-star read of the month. This is Voyage of the Damned by Frances White. I was really excited about this one. This is a fantasy, a high fantasy, supposedly, murder mystery set on a ship with lots of queer representation. That's like Ashley Catnip. It barely delivered. I didn't like the writing style. But mainly the problem here was the world building. It was weird and juvenile. If you actually stop to think about the world, it makes no sense. Like, no world will evolve like this. Like, people do not develop purple, green, white hair color in very weird regions of this very small country. I don't know. It was just very bizarre. The magic system was very woo. It felt like it was damn it, the sound is gone. Anyway, 3 stars. Okay, I used another timer. Let's see if this one works. Okay, so next up is another arc, and that is Every time I go on vacation and someone dies, I was so looking forward to this book. It sounds like a clever meta murder mystery. It wasn't clever. It was very mediocre. Do not go into this book thinking that you're going to get something new and fresh. It's just a cozy mystery with a little bit of an edge to it. Like some people on Goodreads are very angry about the swearing. Apparently that's not something cozy mysteries should do. It was extremely mediocre. I was going to give it 1 or 2 stars, but then like halfway through it did catch me in terms of the mystery, but I hated all the characters and I will not be continuing in the series. It's don't go into this looking for something clever. Why does it not give me the buzzer? What is happening? It's like I use it once and then it stops working. Okay, so next up is Romancing Mr. Bridgerton. This is actually my 3rd read of this book. I haven't read it in about 4 years though. So yeah, it didn't go as well as I thought it would. Like, and I'm sure like a lot of people, we saw the Bridgerton season 3 trailer with Penelope and we were like, oh, we gotta read it. And that's exactly what happened. I saw the trailer and that night I went home and I pulled this down. And at first I was having a great time, but then Colin is kind of a turd. And it ends really abruptly and it leaves so many threads with like her relationship with Eloise dangling, and it's very unsatisfying, and like the conflict that they have with each other like is really angsty up until like the last 2 pages, and then all of a sudden, boop, magically fixed. So I don't know. It didn't go again. Sorry, guys, I have to find a completely new website. This website effing sucks. 3 stars. Okay, we're just gonna use Google, okay? Because I don't think Google would do that to me. We'll see. Watch it be me. Watch, I'm cursed. Okay, next up is another arc. This is Everest Inc. And it's a book about not any like one major expedition or the perils of the mountain. It is a book about the business of Everest, which kind of did sound interesting to me. Like, how did you profitize this giant mountain that's killed so many people? And, you know, really, it wasn't that interesting. Like, the organization was kind of all over the place. And what really bothered me, though, that the author was, like, trying to be neutral. But every time he would talk about somebody who was pro-monetizing Everest, it was very clear that he was into it. And every time he would talk about somebody who was critical of Everest, like Jon Krakauer, for example, he had this tone, like, where he didn't, like... Google. Okay, next up was another arc. I read Ghost Station by S.A. Barnes. Everybody loved last year the space horror that S.A. Barnes wrote that I cannot remember right now. And so I was like, well, I want to try one. And I should have tried the other one because this one was a dud. I didn't like it. It was very dull. I could have forced myself to really pay attention to it and like make a go of it. But I ended up half listening to it in the last half. I don't know why, it just didn't catch me. It was fine. I couldn't pinpoint anything that was wrong with it. I just wasn't captivated by it. And I thought that the audiobook narrator didn't help. So I think maybe she was a little bit too for me. The last 3-star book that I have is Molokai by Alan Brenner. This is a historical fiction novel that was published in the early 2000s about the island of Molokai, and which was used as a refuge for people who had leprosy. And in Hawaii, there's this like huge history of people who had leprosy being criminalized and segregated from the rest of the population because Hawaii was a colony and the people there were extra susceptible to white people diseases, and it was a huge scourge. So the government was like trying to, anyway, it followed a girl who got leprosy at like age 5 through her life, and it was fine. 3 stars. Now we're to my 3.5-star books. Sorry, I feel like this video is going to be really bad because I'm like angry at the timers and I'm like, bleh. So now we got my 3.5 stars. This is Sex Cult Nun. I'm disappointed in this one. I thought it was going to be a lot better than it ended up being. I don't know. It just, like, the first 25% of it was good, but the parts of her childhood just went on too long. She writes it in the style of being in the moment, like Educated did with Tara What's-Her-Face. I don't remember her last name. There's not enough time. And she doesn't reflect on anything because she's writing from the point of view of her childhood self, and it just spends way too long. I was like, okay, I'm ready for this to stop. Can we have her grow up now? And I just lost interest. And at the end it was interesting again, but you know, the first part of this book was actually horrifying. So I just wish it had been tighter. Okay, next up is Oracle by Thomas Old Hoyvelt. I don't know how to say Dutch words. So this is a sci-fi-ish horror book, although that's debatable once you actually read it, that really creeped the hell out of me. But also the parts that weren't creepy were like, eh. So I ended up sort of feeling mixed on it. Like the parts that really worked. Like, for example, the beginning of the book opens and then there's these two kids and they happen upon this 16th century sailing vessel that is just randomly in the middle of a field of tulips, and one of them goes in and never comes out, and then people keep coming to rescue her and people keep going in and never coming out, and this poor little boy is just watching and screaming like, don't go in, and he's so traumatized. You're gonna be like, well, I'm gonna read that now. Okay, next 3.5 star is The Switch. This is a book that I really enjoyed up until almost the very end when the third act conflict happened. I would not call this a romance novel. I would call this a contemporary fiction novel. Other people would call it chick lit. I don't like that term. It is just contemporary fiction. But it's very cute. A grandmother and a granddaughter switch lives, switch places, and both learn things about each other. You know, that kind of stuff. You know what you're in for, and it was very, very well done for what it was. But the third act conflict was so stupid. She gets mad at her grandma for the dumbest reason, and that could have totally been cut out, and it just left a sour taste in my mouth. And I was like, 3.5 stars. I can't give this the 4th star. It's just, it blew it at the end there. So yeah, anyway, 3 seconds to go. I did a good job with this one. Okay, and then my last 3.5 star book is The Last Fee Hunter by Salini Goldberg. This was an ARC. It is a Thai folklore inspired fantasy novel about a fee hunter, which is a type of Thai ghost-ish thing. Again, can't explain it. Not enough time, wasting time. Anyway, he's saved by this pregnant woman who, like, martial arts saves him, even though she's like 9 months pregnant. And then they strike a deal, and he's like, he'll escort her somewhere for his knowledge, and then she'll pay him. So whatever, he does that, and then it goes from there. And the Thai mythology was, I needed more time for that one. It's good. You should read it. Okay, now we're on to the 4 stars. Before I forget, I'm going to do the 3 digital ones I don't have copies of because this is my biggest category. So the first one is Shaina Lende. This is Darcy Little Badger. It is her prequel to Alatsue, which I read last year and really enjoyed. This is about her grandmother. And it was, if you read Alatsue and liked it, which is a story about a young girl who helps to solve a mystery in a world where magic is real, and she lives. And yeah, it's good. And it was basically the same as Alatsue, and I really enjoyed getting to see her grandmother's perspective on the world. And I read it 3 weeks ago, and I don't remember very much about it, but I remember I had a good time, and the audiobook was good. So if you liked it, God, this video is gonna suck. I'm sorry in advance. I think the problem is I'm doing spoilers. I'm doing this at night instead of in the morning, which is when I need to do my thinky talky. If I have to think, it has to be in the morning. Otherwise, you're gonna get this. Also, I said I wasn't going to do the physical copies yet. I'm not done with my digital copies yet. Okay, next up is The Tea Dragon Society by Kay O'Neill. And this is a middle grade graphic novel that I've seen people reading, and I picked it up because of Read Harder, finally. And I got it. It's on Kindle Unlimited if you want to get it. But it's a graphic novel set in a fantasy world about this little girl whose mother is a blacksmith, and she's half orc, half human. And you can tell she's not really into the blacksmithing so much, but she happens to run across a baby tea dragon like just a regular tea dragon, not a baby, but it looks like a baby, in a marketplace, and she rescues it and takes it home. And the man who takes care of the dragon offers to teach her how to take care of tea dragons, and it's a whole thing. And they literally produce tea leaves off of their horns, and she finds a community. All right, and the last digital one I have is Most Ardently. This is a queer remix of Pride and Prejudice, where Elizabeth is a trans man, and obviously he can't present himself as a woman, as a man in Regency England, so that is a huge conflict. And I really liked this a lot. Like, it was almost perfect the way that it took the story, and it didn't follow it word by word. It let the premise of who, in this case, Oliver, his name is Oliver, who Oliver was and his changed circumstances dictate where the story went. It didn't switch to it 100%. Switch isn't the right word. Whatever. But the author... Okay, I just gotta tell you this because this is important. I didn't have enough time. The author really messed up some historical details that a true Janeite would know, and that disappointed me, so I couldn't give it 5 stars. Now on to my non-digital copies. Okay, so next up is Queer Ducks. This is And Other Animals by Elliot Schrafer, The Natural World of Animal Sexuality. So I picked this up for Read Harder. Got some Read Harder books in this month, and it is a book that examines with scientific studies the queer behavior of animals in the natural world. And surprise, surprise, queerness is natural. So the next time somebody says it's not natural for a male animal and a female, non-female animal to blah, 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 or whatever, I'm rambling. Animals are queer. There is some really queer behavior that has been elided or written over or ignored, or written off as like, oh, they're just doing it for dominance. No, they like it. Okay, next up is Sunbringer by Hannah Kaner. This is the second book in this trilogy that I forget the name of. The Godkiller trilogy, is that what it's called? Or is there something else? I don't remember. Anyway, the first book was Godkiller. I read it last year. And I'm very sad to say that even though I liked this and I had a good time, like for some reason my enthusiasm for this series has just kind of taken a nosedive. I owned the first book and now I just got this one out of the library, and I'm really glad that I did that because it was fine. It was good. If you like the first book, you're going to like this book. But I just, for some reason, inexplicably have lost interest in this series. And I don't know if I'm going to read book 3. I probably will because it's only one more book. But anyway, it was good. It was good. Maybe I just wasn't in the right mood for it. Okay, next up in my 4-star stack is The Minuscule Mansion of Myra Malone. This is a cozy-ish fantasy set in our world about Myra, whose grandfather, was it her grandfather? I don't remember. Just pretend it's her grandpa. Stepdad, step-grandpa, whatever. Somebody gives her a dollhouse and she spends her entire childhood, which is lonely because she lost somebody. I can't remember who. Oh my God, my brain. And she elaborately creates this dollhouse and the rooms in it. And now she's internet famous for it. And all of a sudden, some guy on the other side of the country finds her blog, looks at the dollhouse, and recognizes the rooms. Like they're replicas of existing rooms. I'm doing these books real justice here. Doing them good. Okay, next up is Happiness Falls by Angie Kim. I actually did the audio of this even though I had the hard copy because I heard the audiobook was good, and it was really good. I'm actually really glad I did the audio. But, so I didn't like this as much as her first book, but maybe that's just personal preference. This is a book about a family who, it's a family of three children and a mother and a father. They're a mixed race family. And one day, and the youngest son has Angelman syndrome and is autistic and is non-communicative. So he is with his father one day out, and his father disappears, and Eugene is the boy's name, and he comes running in, and the father has disappeared, and the only person is Eugene, and he can't talk. God, I'm getting sweaty. Okay, next up is A Fate Inked in Blood by Danielle L. Jensen. This is my first book by this author. I will definitely be reading more books from her. I had a really good time with this. This is a book about Freya. She is married to a real jackass, but he has magical powers, basically where he can feed the village with his magic, and because he's a child of a god, which is basically when a god gifts their powers to somebody. Anyway, it's a whole thing. And one day somebody shows up to claim her because it turns out she has God's blood as well, and she kills her husband, and then she's taken captive basically by this king. She kills her husband just as a parting shot, just for funsies, because he betrayed her and sold her to this guy. Anyway, he has a prophecy that she is going to help him be... Romantasy! You can't talk about fantasy books like this. Maybe this will be the last lightning round that I do. I don't know. We'll see. Next up, I'm going to talk about these two books together, and that is Sleeping Giants and Waking Gods, they are not the same size. Yes, it bothers me. But I did the audio on this one, Sleeping Giants. It was a reread, and this was my first time through Waking Gods because I needed to reread this to be able to read it. I did not like this as much this time. I don't think it holds up as well on reread because a lot of the fun of this book is experiencing it for the first time. I had a better time with this one because it was all new to me, but regardless, they're 4-star books for me, not 5-star like they are for some people. Basically, this robot is in pieces all around the earth, and this girl named Rose falls into the hand of one when she's a child and ends up researching them and finding the pieces and putting them back together. And it follows, and it's not epistolary, it's mixed media. Good sci-fi. I should have maybe doubled that one, but it's all the same story, so I don't need to talk about them both. They were the same rating. Okay, next up is Sleight of Hand by Elizabeth R. Anderson. This is the second book in the Alewives of Colmar Cozy Mystery series, historical mysteries set in the 1300s post the Black Plague, about these 3 alewives who decide that they're going to sort of like buck the conventions of their town and brew ale themselves, even though it's looked down upon for women to make ale and sell it for profit as opposed to just making it for their husbands. But the people of the town like the ale. And they also somehow become like solvers of crime. In this one, they find a hand in their mash and it ruins their mash, and they're all very upset about this. But then they somehow get involved in the plot to figure out how this hand ended up in the mash and whose hand it is and why. Very good series. I don't know what the hell I can say about this book in 45 seconds. This is one of the most interesting books I've read in the past couple of years. I went into it with low expectations because it doesn't have great reviews, but it was so interesting and it held my attention and it gave me a lot to think about. It's a sci-fi book about a Mars in the future, post climate change disaster on Earth, and it looks at the way that a colony on Mars might evolve separately from a culture on Earth, and then the Earthlings become the immigrants, and then there's a whole thing. It's also very queer. I don't know how to explain it. There's mammoths. The mammoths were the best part of the book. They resurrected mammoths. And there's like a political plot. It's a marriage of convenience. I don't know. It's very thoughtful, naive, but thoughtful. I cheated. Shut up. Okay, so this is technically a horror book, but honestly, I don't think I would call it that. I think it's more of a historical fantasy with a horror creature involved. This follows a woman named Colette. That's not always been her name. That's what she goes by now. She's a vampire, and she was created by her grandfather after she was very sick, and he saved her life after all of her family died from a disease. I forget which disease. Who cares? Anyway, she ends up living for hundreds of years, and as the book starts, she's becoming hungrier and hungrier, and the blood that she eats from animals doesn't last her long anymore, and it's clear that something is going on, and by the end you figure out what that is. But it was a slow burn historical fantasy character study, basically, and I really enjoyed it. I'm really bad at this, you guys. Okay, now we've got my lone 4.5-star book, and that is Contact by Carl Sagan. So I adored this. So Lindsay and I buddy read this and we both loved it. Lindsay gave it 4.5 rounded up. I'm keeping it rounded down for now because it's a novel written by a scientist and it's very obvious. But it was so charming. It was so hopeful and smart, and it really made me think. It made Lindsay cry. We both then did like sort of a buddy watch, like she was at her house and I was here, of the movie the other night, and it holds up. The ending wasn't my favorite. The ending in the book does it better. It just makes more sense. But I love this. If you guys were a fan of the 1997 movie with Jodie Foster and Matthew McConaughey, you should check out the book because it's just as good, even better in parts. Okay, now we're to my 5 stars. I have 1 digital. First one is Raw Dog by Jamie Loftus. I love Jamie Loftus. She's a podcaster, and she decided to do this thing to write a book about the cultural history of hot dogs, and also it's sort of a travelogue where she drives across the country. Well, her boyfriend drives her across the country in a road trip one summer. She calls it Hot Dog Summer, stopping at notable hot dog places and then talking about what they taste like, the history of the place, the history of the area, and like she gets into labor practices, she gets into like the actual meat, she gets into where the sausages came from, how they became American, food eating contests. Like, it's funny. It's also a weird chronicle of a breakup. And it's during 2021 that she did. Okay. My last 3 books. Okay, this one I just finished last night, and it is The Familiar by Leigh Bardugo. This is a historical fantasy novel set in 16th century Spain, late 16th century, during the Spanish Inquisition, the Spanish Golden Age, where they were just killing everyone. I could talk about the Inquisition forever. We're not going to talk about that. I'm wasting time. Anyway, main character's name is Lucia, and she is a scullion in a poor noble house, and she can do small magics like unburning bread or fixing a hem or warming water or healing a small cut on her hand, that kind of stuff. And her mistress finds out and decides to show her off to gain social clout because, again, they're a poor noble house and they're not very looked on, and things go bad. Seriously, guys, I don't think this lightning round thing works. Maybe if I read like over 35 books in the future, will I do the lightning round. Okay, next up is a book that I have 2 copies of, and that's A Taste of Golden Iron. I bought this copy for myself from Book Depository before it sunk, and then I was gifted this beautiful copy by my friend over Mathilde for Cannonball Read Exchange at Christmas. So yeah, this was 5 stars. It's a historical fantasy romance about these 2 dudes. One is a bodyguard and one is a prince, but it's so well thought out. Like, the world building was so good. I had such a great time with it. Like, it's thick, but it's deservedly thick because there's just as much fantasy and plotting as there is romance, and it's a slow burn. Oh, it's such a good slow burn. Read it. Pippin, what the are you doing? You're blaming Pippin, but it's Lily. Last book is Bunny. So I read this at the very, very beginning of April. So I forgot that this was an April book. This was 5 stars. Can't explain what this is about. It's technically dark academia. It's lit fic. It's freaking weird. It's about a woman named Samantha who's in a literary writing workshop, creative writing MFA at this place called Warren College, or is it Warren University? I still don't know. And she gets invited to be part of this clique called the Bunnies, and they all call each other Bunny. This is why everyone calls them the Bunnies. And I can't say any more than that. This was so well written. It just captured me. It's so hard to capture me when you're doing lit fic. 5 stars. And that's it. I give up. Give up. We're done. Oh my God, what a disaster of a video. I apologize in advance. I don't know, maybe you like the chaos. Maybe you don't care if the book reviews make sense. I'm gonna reevaluate my life and we'll see what happens in May because I think I'm on track to read a lot of books in May, so we'll see. There's gotta be a better way to do wrap-ups besides this when you read a lot of books. Anyway, if you made it this far in the video, thank you. And if you don't have anything that you would like to say, please leave me, well, we already did bunnies. Is there a scorpion emoji? Leave me a bug. Leave me a bug emoji. If there's a scorpion, leave me a scorpion. But if not, just some sort of bug for The Familiar. And then if you like the video and you want to see more from me, please don't forget to leave me a like, subscribe if you wanna. And yeah, I will see you when I'm more coherent and have a life plan and just, yeah. Anyway. Okay, bye.